to the KidSilk podcast. Today I'm going to chat about my December 2022 knits. If you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by. And those that are returning, a nice warm and hearty welcome back. As you can see, we do still have our Christmas decorations up. I don't know about you, but I find the holidays can always be a bit of a busy, sometimes a little bit stressful time of the year. I hope that you were able to take a bit of time to, unwind and maybe do a little indulgence and relax, especially now that, I find the busiest time is kind of over. As you may notice, we have a greater concentration of little ornaments at the top of our tree. That's because we have a Christmas elf who keeps kind of sneaking up and every day just takes a little ornament off the tree and moves it throughout our apartment. So then luckily the elf is only like 2 feet tall, so we can just, every time she grabs one, we just move it up further. That little Christmas elf is our dog, Goose. Another thing that I actually did that I'm proud of is I washed my hand knit. So this is a freshly washed sweater. What I like to do is I do them in my kitchen sink, which is just over there. I scrub it out and then I wash each one at a time with like hand wash, wool, soft detergent, and then I lay them all to dry. When I was doing this, I realized that despite my regular wardrobe being very neutral colored, all my hand knits are like bright, vivid kind of jewel tones. Although I do love this, I think in the new year, I'm gonna try to knit a couple more neutral, like white, gray, black sweaters, just so that I don't know, just to balance things out. Well, this one that I'm wearing right now is one of those jewel tone ones. This is the balloon sweater by PetiteKnit. I knit this in 2021 and I love it. It's super warm. I have a single strand of Madeline Tosh Merino light. It's a merino fingering weight yarn. I don't know if that's the exact name. And then a drops KidSilk mohair. And the mohair plus merino is toasty. I love this sweater. You may notice a bit of a theme in this episode with petite knits. I've got quite a few to show you. One of my goals for December was to clear off my needles so I could kind of start January afresh. Spoiler alert, I did not get even close to doing that. I did manage to get 2 projects off my needles, but then I casted on a new one. So I currently have, I think, 4 works in progress, but January is another month. We'll get there. So one thing that I did get done is some Christmas knitting, and that is these beautiful socks by Helen Stewart. These are part of her Handmaiden Sock Society Volume 2, so it includes 6 sock patterns, and then these are the Cornish cream tea socks. And they have this beautiful lace motif that runs down the center of the sock. And all of her patterns in that kit have the classic gusset heel where you reinforce it with doing like the slipping every other stitch just to make the heel a bit more denser. And I used Fidley Dyeworks BFL sock yarn. This is my first time, BFL is my first time moving from Merino, and it's my first breed specific yarn. That's something I really want to get into in the new year. And I actually subscribed to a breed of the month subscription where every month in 2023 I will get a new yarn from a different sheep breed. And I really like BFL. It seems to be a little bit shinier than Merino, a little bit fuller, like more poofy. At least maybe I've only been really using superwash Merino, which I think tends to be less kind of bloomy. And it also is a bit more rustic, so it is just a touch more grippy. Like I mentioned this last time, but like as you can see, as I like shake this skein, the yarn isn't falling apart, whereas I find with my merino skeins, they're so much more slippery that it just slips right off. And I just realized something I wanted to mention about this is I actually currently am just wearing this next to my skin and I'm not finding it itchy, which I'm a little surprised about actually. So I guess because mohair, a lot of people can find mohair itchy, but I'm not finding it itchy at the moment. We'll see how I do maybe in the next 30 minutes, see if I'm still happy with it. So as I mentioned, these were a Christmas gift, and I mean, we're now after Christmas and I still have them. I did get them done in time, but unfortunately it just got busy and I didn't have time to drop them off. Our car battery ended up dying right a couple days before Christmas, and that day I had planned on just running around town and instead spent it trying to get it to jump, because we had a giant snow dump in Vancouver, which caused, like, Vancouver isn't really used to snow. A lot of cars don't have winter tires or all season tires. So when the snow dumped, it's basically chaos. And we have like BCAA, which is a service that will come and, help you with your car when it's broken down. But their call line was so busy that they weren't even letting you sit on hold, because they already had, I think it was 120 people on hold. What I ended up doing, and okay, I'm going on a tangent here, I'll get back to the knitting in a second, but you can get these mini car battery booster things. So I bought one of those. It's like this big and maybe a couple pounds. And we were able to start our car, after I charged it all day in the apartment, we were able to start our car with that. And I'm going to keep it in the car because our dog, bless her heart, she gets excited in the trunk and she'll actually pop up and hit the light on in the trunk and we won't notice. So I think this is the second time that she's caused the car battery to die. It happens. So now we're prepared. And I loved it so much, I almost wanted to get one for everyone for Christmas, but my husband reined me back. I'll put that in the description if you're curious about what I'm talking about. So back to the socks. These were surprisingly quick to knit up. I was very lucky. The person I'm gifting these to has a very small foot, so I actually only have 54 stitches around the circumference, and I think they're a size 6 or 6.5 foot. And that combination of less stitches around the circumference and a short foot, I think I got one of these done in a week, which for me is quite the accomplishment. And a couple things that I had fun with while knitting these is I tried out a new technique where you don't use a cable needle for doing these cables that run along either side. These are pretty small cables. I think they're 3 or 4 3-stitch cables. And I'll link that video below. I watched Andrea Mowry about how she does it. But you basically essentially like pinch the stitches. You pick up the stitch that you want either behind or in front, and you move that onto the right hand needle. Then you pinch your work, slip those stitches that you want, the ones that are right on the needle, off. Then you take that one that you had that was like the 3rd stitch in and put that back on your left hand needle, and then put these front stitches back on. So you're basically rearranging the stitches on your left hand needle to then just knit across them in order, which will give you that stitch either to the front or the back. The other part of this lace work involved knitting 4 stitches together and SSKing 4 stitches together. So it was like S, 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 K. That was, I'd say, the most frustrating part about this pattern. It took me a while to do both the knit 2 to 4 together and then the SSK, just trying to slip, especially when you're dealing with such small needles and small stitches, trying to actually catch all 4 stitches when I was pulling the needle back out. Kind of, I don't know. For that reason, I might not do this pattern again. I've now done 3 of her 6 in that set, and I really do love them. I checked out the other 2 of the other 3 that I have remaining, and I'm excited to knit those, and I will be knitting those in the new year. But I think if this one is maybe not the one that I'd recommend the most out of them. But I mean, if you want to do something new and learn how to knit 4 stitches together, and then, go for it. I'm not gonna stop you. The other thing I wanted to mention, was when I was doing the heel gusset. So this heel, you kind of knit the heel flap, and then you pick up stitches along this edge, join with the stitches that you had resting, pick up, and then go back across the heel flap. And I always find that this section here, where you're moving between, picking up stitches and then rejoining with the resting stitches, I always get a hole. And I find it's kind of one of the areas that has the most tension, because socks have negative ease, that they, you know, hug your feet. I tried something new, and I think it might be my favorite way to pick up the stitches now between that in the gusset. What I did was, rather than, so you pick up one stitch that's like in this gap between your rested stitches and your picked up stitches, and rather than picking up the bar that runs between two stitches, which is what I normally do, I actually picked up the two bars of the stitches on the row below, and then I knit those two together. So there was the two stitches, and I grabbed those two bars. And I think that really reinforced it a lot better. I'm gonna knit more socks, and then I'll make sure to film that technique, and I'll put it up here. But that was very exciting, because although there is still a tiny little hole, it's really not noticeable. I ended up starting these in April of this year. So this was the pattern that I took with me when I went on my grand hiking adventure this summer. If you don't know, I hiked part of the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail that's 2,600 miles or 4,400 kilometers. And it runs through basically like lengthwise through the entire United States, through California, Oregon, and Washington. And this was the pattern I took along with the idea that I'd be able to finish. I thought I'd be able to finish multiple socks on that trip, but unfortunately, I was hiking almost all day, many days in a row. So I only got I think I actually did manage to get all the way up to here on these socks before sending them back. So it's nice. I got these done. And great things to say. I'm excited about the yarn. I think that was all I wanted to mention about these socks. Oh yeah, the last thing is just I ended up using my 9-inch circulars on these. So I have the Chiagu Lace Mini, and this is I think the second pair of socks that I've done on 9-inch circumference needles, and I've gotten used to it. And I did the lace work, which can be frustrating on mini needles. I always feel a bit like a little mouse, like with because it's only a 2-inch long needle, so you can only have so many fingers. But I'm getting used to it, and I really am loving just not having to do magic loop. That'll also be a theme you'll see coming up. I try to avoid magic loop. I just find it's faster. I do love magic loop for its versatility, in the sense that you can have one set of needles, one set of long circulars, and knit anything that is smaller circumference-wise than those needles. For that reason, I love magic loop, and I still will do some of it, of course. But I enjoyed not having to do it for these socks. So my second bit of knitting that I did, which was the part of the gift knitting, is my niece is pregnant, and the baby is due late February, and I'm actually hosting the baby shower in a couple of days. And I talked about this last time, how I was doing Selma's sleeping suit for her, and that is a petite knit pattern. But it's huge. It's massive. So last time I showed this, I believe I had just started one of the legs, and I had just moved on to my third ball of Berroco Ultra Wool. This is a worsted superwash. I really like this yarn. Very bouncy, and I love the color. This color is 3300, which I think is their I think this is their stark white, the whitest one that they have. So I was knitting this, and I was knitting out the legs, and you can see I have a lot of seaming in my future, which is not my favorite thing to do. And the legs are huge. So this is a 3 to 6 month old size, and the baby is due late February. So if we, count 3 months, so it's late February, it's the end of February, so basically it's March, April, May. So the baby will start to fit this possibly in May, June, July, August. So really the baby can use this from May to August. I don't know if you see any problems with that, but I don't think a winter sleeping suit is going to work in northern Alberta through the summer, where it gets into the hundreds Fahrenheit. You see I'm Canadian, but after spending all that time hiking, it was always Fahrenheit that we were dealing with, just because that's what people talk about. But that's in the mid 30s, I think. I think that's 35 plus in Celsius. We'll see. I'm going to look that up after if I was wrong. But after kind of just doing the legs and realizing how huge this is and really coming to terms with the fact that I've knit the wrong gift for my niece, I put this away and ended up picking up a new project, which I'll talk about in a second. One thing, I thought that I would only need 3 balls of wool for this ginormous sleeping suit, but I did need 4. So I need 400 grams of yarn, which in itself should have been a flag that this is indeed a huge project. This is almost the equivalent, I would say, to knitting an adult sweater. So if you're looking for a quick baby knit gift, I do not suggest this. I do still absolutely love the way it looks, and I can't wait to give this to someone. I'm planning to give this to someone who has like a late summer baby, and then that way it'll hit kind of late, you know, smack dab in the middle of winter. I am going to finish this up once I get the baby gift done, which I'll show in a second. But now, I mean, a couple things. One, I learned, you know, the designer does know how many balls of yarn. I originally thought I only would need 3, but I definitely do need the 4th. As you can see, this is almost the end of 3 balls. The other is, like, you know, you can look at the yardage to get a rough idea of how much knitting you have in your future. So if you see something like 400 grams of yarn for a baby item, you can think, oh yeah, that's going to be a lot of knitting, and that's going to be a pretty big baby item. It is nice that what PetiteKnit does, I think, is she ends up knitting, this is really like a 6-month-old size, and then if you have, you know, your baby, because kids grow at such different rates. So if you have a baby that's maybe a little bit above average, then you're able to, you know, maybe fit this in the 3-month-old size. But the good news is that you know this will definitely fit, I think, you know, at some point when the baby is 3 to 6 months old. Whereas I've knit other patterns that really do seem to be for that smaller size. So she seems to go for the 6-month-old, where I've done some where they go for like the 3, whereas this is like the 3 to 6 month old size, which is good to know. The reason why I picked this is because I thought it would be more fitting the 3-month size, and then it would fit kind of the tail end of winter for her. So that was good to know with PetiteKnit, and we'll see the same theme with the next item that I'm going to show you. One thing I tried out, which I loved, was a coworker at the knitting store told me a way to use light bulb markers so that you don't have to count when doing like a certain repeat. So when doing these legs, you end up decreasing, you know, every couple of rounds, you know, a certain number of times. But what I did is I put a light bulb marker at the beginning, and I attached on the number of light bulb markers for the number of repeats that I had to do. So I think in this case I had to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I had to do 4 decreases. So I attached 4 light bulb markers up here. And then once I got to the point where I needed to do a decrease, I just took the light bulb marker off and put it on my work where the decrease was. And not only did that make me not have to like keep track of how many I had done, but it also allowed an easy visual because there was a certain number of, I think it was like inches or rows between each decrease. So then I could easily just count my rows from my last decrease. And it just made it a lot more brainless. Before I normally kind of like write like a little like, you know, a line for each time I do something. But I often find that I don't trust myself with that line. Like I'll be looking at it and I'm like, is it really 3 though? Like, did I maybe do 1 and then knit a little bit and then think I forgot and put another one down? Or did I just miss it completely? Because I do that, even with the like, I don't know why, but trying to just draw a line every round seems to be outside of my capabilities. So this is definitely something I'm going to continue to do in the future. And then just less thinking and more knitting. It is all knit back and forth, as I was saying, with the seaming, so it is a bit of a slog. That's how I would describe this. A bit of a slog. I do love it. And I would say knit this for someone who you really love and are willing to put the slog in for. The great news is Canada is a cold country, so I should not have a problem finding someone that I can gift this to in the future. And then I'll have the project done. So maybe it'll be a busy time in my life where I can just pull this out and gift it to someone. All right, so this was the failed project. Oopsies, the ball is all the way down here. Whatever. I'll just move it around. So when I realized that that wasn't going to work for my niece, I ended up starting another petite knit pattern. And this, I'll put this up here, is the Ingrid sweater. So I believe this is called a Guernsey. Oh, I don't know. But there is this style of knitting that was, I think, along the coast of northern England, where they did, basically it was single colored, but they did motifs in panels using knits and purls. And as you can see, that's what this is. So it's like a traditional English sweater, mini sized. And this is by PetiteKnit, in case you didn't think I was already, obsessed enough. The baby shower is in 2 days, which is why this is almost done. I've just got a little final touches done. So I knit this in the 1 to 3 month old size. And again, as you can see, it's actually pretty big. I would say this is a 3-month-old size garment, which means PetiteKnit has very cleverly knit for the larger size, which is great. And I knit this using Double Sunday by Sandnes Garn. This is actually the recommended yarn for the pattern, which is a merino wool. It is non-superwash though, which I didn't know. I was kind of in a bit of a panic and just wanted to get started. I'm a little sorry about that to the new mom, so it means that it can't go in the wash. I am going to gift this with a garment bag so that she can put it in on delicate, and I think that hopefully it will work. I don't know though. I've made this mistake before I've been trying to find superwash yarns for moms, but oh well. It's soft. It's a multiplied yarn. I haven't worked with a multiplied yarn in a long time. I want to say there's 3 or 4 plies of it. And for that reason, I'm not loving it. It seems like the plies kind of fall apart. So it feels less bouncy and full. But I think the way it's knitting up is great. And we'll see what happens when I block it. And this type of garment will really benefit from a good blocking, because then it'll really even out all the pattern work, all the texture in the yarn. The colorway that I picked is 6851. I don't know what the name of it is. It's just got the number on it. PetiteKnit does seem to partner with Sandnes Garn, so she has quite a bit of projects with this yarn. I'm not quite sure. I did want to do the Sandnes Garn's pattern, the soft knit for women. It's the the Guthrie sweater, which seems to be all over social media. But I was originally planning on knitting this using Double Sunday. Now I'm kind of reevaluating that if I want to knit a full adult size sweater in this yarn, just because I'm not totally in love with it. So we'll see. It would be nice though to have something of my own to kind of see how it wears, just because it does seem to be a pretty popular yarn. This sweater is the first time that I've ever done a folded over collar. And as you can see, I kind of did part of it up here. What you do is you knit a kind of double the length, or a little bit double plus a bit longer than what you want, and then as you bind off, you pick up stitches on the inside and knit the 2 stitches together with one on your needle, so that it creates this very clean bind off folded over collar. It was super simple to do. I don't know if other designers do it differently, but I do love the way PetiteKnit has done it. As you can see, I've only done part of it. I wanted to get the full body of the sweater done before finishing off the neck. I don't know why. I just kind of realized that I wanted to get going on it. hopefully she'll like this. I think the sweater is, and to be honest, it's kind of a little bit cuter than the snowsuit. I think the snowsuit is very like pretty, whereas I think this is very cute. Another thing that was new with this is the construction. I've wanted to do this for an adult garment, but you start by knitting this back panel and you add short rows to give that diagonal. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it too much, but basically it slants like this at the shoulder, and then you, from the short rows, and then you pick up stitches along here and you knit across the shoulder, and then you do the same for both shoulders, and then you cast on underneath the neck, and then you start knitting, you know, the front panel, and then you join with the back panel to create the armhole. I want to try this for an adult garment just to see the fit. It was fun to do because I do want to try out this construction. It was pretty simple. It did create a million ends to weave in because you're constantly picking up stitches. That was a negative. I think I want to say this tiny little sweater maybe has like 12 to 14 ends to weave in. And just like seaming, weaving in ends is a pain. I don't know what it is about finishing a garment that is the toughest part. And I don't think I'm alone there. I think that's a pretty common theme, that the finishing takes forever, like sewing on the buttons. If I didn't have a deadline, I don't think I'd ever sew on my buttons. Well, yeah, I mean, some of my sweaters, it has taken me like 4 months. I'll wear it without buttons just to avoid sewing on the buttons. Anywho, I don't think there's anything else I wanted to say. Oh yeah, just the last thing was I did want, so with this sweater, the way that I find the front and the back is I look for a mistake. So on the front of this sweater, this was the first time that I had done German short rows. And right here, you're probably not gonna be able to see it, but I just didn't resolve it properly when I went around to knit. So I have a mistake, and that's how I know this is the front of the sweater. This one is a bit more clear because, as I said, it does have this on the back. But just since, you know, she's a new mom and it's going to be exhausting, I've decided now that all my sweaters I'm going to end up putting a little X in the back so that I can definitively mark the back. So I think I'll just I have some darning thread in black, so I think I might just, you know, quickly stitch in a little X so that it's clear to her where the back is. The other thing that I did with my stitch markers, I mentioned how I liked counting on the other one, and that inspired me. So as I was knitting the neck, there's a certain number of rows you do before you do something that she likes to kind of mark where you fold it over. And so you have to do, you know, let's say 3 rounds of knitting before doing this extra step. And so to count those 3 rounds, what I did was I had the beginning of round marker, and then when I started the first round, 1 stitch from the beginning of round marker, I put my other next marker in a different color, and then I knit around. And then I knit my beginning of round, and then I knit that 1 stitch, and then I would take out the marker, knit 1 more stitch, put the marker back. And that way, now there would be, on my second round, there's 2 stitches between the beginning of round marker and the marker and my second marker. And that keeps count of how many rounds that I've done. And I think that would also be great for when you kind of pick up and put down projects. So rather than searching for where you've written your little tick marks, you can just count the number of stitches between your beginning of round and your next marker. I'm definitely going to use that little trick moving forward. Anything that can just get any sort of memory out of my mind, I like. The less thinking, the better. This is a couple days away. I'm going to feverishly work on this later on today to get it done in time. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, which is a bit more sad. So this is the Westknit's Twist and Turns Make-Along Shawl from 2022. It's knit in the same yarn as the socks, which is the Fidley Dyeworks BFL sock yarn. So it's a nylon BFL blend. It's non-superwash. I bought 3 more colors. Well, I have 5 more skeins of this yarn to make the shawl. I haven't knit this in a while, and I made the decision to stop. And part of what influenced that was I watched Knitting Natty. She's a great YouTuber. You should check her out. She did a vlog on knitting this shawl. And I realized that I had about 40 hours of knitting left on this, and I don't wear shawls. I'm currently actually in the process of ripping out my only other shawl that I've knit to knit socks with it. I'm knitting the Dre Renee, everyday socks, the DK ones that came out for her sock knit along over Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving. So when I learned that I had 40 more hours left and the odds of me wearing this are so low, I decided it was time to say goodbye to the shawl, which was hard. This I think is the first project I've ever abandoned midway through. I tend to really like to finish things that I start. And my first thought was like, oh, am I failing? And I was talking to my husband about this, and he's like, you shouldn't view, stopping a project as a failure. And I agree. Like, if I'm knitting something and I find it really doesn't fit well, I shouldn't be afraid of stopping, because I'm really actually saving myself time to work on other things that I like. Like, I'd really much rather focus on knitting sweaters. There's a lot of sweaters that I want to knit in the new year, so I'd prefer to do that over continuing to knit this shawl. I do want to knit one of Westknit's shawls. I don't think this one is really my style. I like his other ones that are big, half moon shapes where the stitch patterns run kind of, outwards. I really like his 2021 one, which was the shawlography, and I was looking at that thinking that maybe I'll knit that one in the future. I'm not going to cast on. Like I said, I have a lot of shawls that I want to do. The nice thing is, since I knit this in sock yarn, and in the back of my mind I was like, oh, I should pick a yarn that I can use for something else. I will just be knitting a bunch of socks with this yarn, and I love this yarn for socks, so I'm very happy and excited about that. It was a hard decision, but I do think it's the right one, and it's a good practice for me to stop something that I don't think I'm gonna wear. The next project, of course, will be taking this all apart, but that will be a hard project, because just like finishing, unwinding projects tends to be pretty tough. So so you won't be seeing this in my podcast anymore. I gotta say goodbye. I still probably spent almost like 20 hours knitting this, and it was fun getting to learn. I learned lots. I learned about how to do an I-cord edge as you knit down something. There was a new kind of short row that I learned. I learned some new cables. This technique was very new to me. I learned a new cast on called the cable cast on, which is an alternate to just like the backwards loop. And I used the cable cast on actually in this sweater when I was joining the front and back. The left and right shoulder. I used the new cast on as an alternate. I think I prefer it actually to the backwards loop, just because it's a bit more sturdy. I'll put a link to that also below. And that is the main reason why I wanted to knit one of Westknit's shawls, is because of all the techniques. And he also creates these videos which are just jam-packed with little insights that he uses. Like I mentioned, I love his philosophy around, if you make a mistake, just, fix it later on rather than stressing. And because I have mistakes in this, and as long as the gist of it is right, I don't think you can notice them. I loved participating, and maybe I'll participate again next year, and maybe I'll finish it, maybe I won't. But this helped me get my number of works in progresses down as well, which is something that I would like to do so that I can cast on some new sweaters. Speaking of casting on new sweaters, I ended up creating a swatch in this yarn. So this is the Cirro Fibreco yarn, and it is a Surrey alpaca merino cotton yarn. The core is cotton, and then I believe it's a merino Surrey that makes it fuzzy like this. It's a sport weight yarn. And Surrey alpaca is seen a bit as a substitute for mohair because it should be softer than mohair. A lot of people find mohair itchy. If you find mohair itchy, then maybe look into trying out Surrey alpaca. I was curious how this would knit up. My plan is to make the PetiteKnit Cumulous blouse with this. And this is the swatch. And I'm very proud to say that I magically got gauge on the swatch, which is a bit of a miracle because it seems like I never get gauge. And I ended up substituting. So her pattern calls for 2 strands of mohair, and I ended up substituting for 1 strand of sport weight yarn. And how I like to figure out my substitutions, well, I think there's 2 ways that you can do it. The first is you look at the gauge of the final, like the gauge swatch, which will have, all the yarns held together, and it'll typically have, your stitches per inch. And then each yarn at the yarn store will come with, the recommended needle and then the stitches per inch. So if you can match up the needle and the stitches per inch, then you're golden because you found that final, the final one that has a bunch of yarns together. In this case, since it is, and you can see this in the pattern, it's a bit more of a looser design. So the suggested needle for this yarn is smaller, which means you can't really use that technique. So this is where that tool that I built on my website can come in handy, where I estimate what multiple yarns held together is the final weight. So for that case, then you can put 2 lace weights together, which is what 2 mohairs typically is, and you'll see that it comes out to a sport, and then you can more confidently substitute it. Of course, you should always do a gauge swatch because your tension will be different. And also there's actually quite a bit of variation even within these, defined sizes. It's a lot of wiggle room. They're normally defined by the thickness of the yarn, but every yarn, just like your needles will have 0.5 millimeter difference between sizes. As you can imagine, a yarn having 0.5 millimeter thickness, it really does change quite a bit. And that is why it's so important to do a gauge swatch, even though they're so annoying to do. But this yarn, the swatch turned out great. It's nice and soft. It looks like what I want it to look like, which means that in the very near future, I can cast on this sweater, which I purchased this yarn a few months ago, kind of end of summer, and it's been sitting in my box for a while. This I wanted to cast on before Christmas, but I thought I would have all my projects done before Christmas, which was silly thinking. I'm excited though to get casting on some sweaters for myself. I've got a couple more pairs of socks to finish up, as well as these 2 baby items, and then my needles will be free. Anyways, that is all I wanted to chat about today. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's. We're going to spend New Year's with my parents and just do a quiet one. I don't think we're even going to stay up till midnight. At least that's not the plan. And I'm very, very happy about that. I kind of want just something chill. We're actually going to watch Glass Onion, which I've heard, or not Glass Onion. No, it's called Glass Onion. Yeah, it's the latest one with Daniel Craig, the murder mystery, which I've heard is supposed to be amazing. I will maybe update you on that. It'll be a month from now though, so. Anyways, I hope to do these once a month, and they will be published on the 1st of the month. If you're interested, please subscribe. It means a lot to helping with my channel. Thanks so much. Have a great New Year's, and welcome to 2023. All the best. Bye.